Make sure you check out our online store where we work with our graphic designer to create stunning garment and product designs that feature a wide variety of aircraft types such as British fighters, World War II aircraft, American bombers, Russian fighters and much more. You can pick your favourite designs and personalise any items within our Redbubble store that range from clothing right the way through to stationery. All of our designs feature our logo so you can show your support for the channel while getting a quality product. You can head to our website aircrewinterview.tv and click store, or go to redbubble.com/people/AC interview. Thank you and enjoy. So Kim, when did you first become interested in aviation?
That's a good question because it started pretty early in my career. I decided in fifth grade that I wanted to be a pilot, and it actually occurred after the Space Shuttle Challenger accident, which I know seems a bit ironic. But for me, I think watching that, I realized that the astronauts died doing something that they believed in, something they thought was bigger than themselves. And that really appealed to me, along with the thrill of flight. And I decided in fifth grade that was what I wanted to do. I was going to join the Air Force. I was going to become a fighter pilot. And it really took off from there. After that, I was totally committed into going to the Air Force Academy. And I decided that for my 16th birthday, what I really wanted was flying lessons, and my parents were gracious enough to let me try it.
Nice.
And I was able to eventually solo in a Cessna. I think by then I was 17, but started very early in my career, just really interested in aviation and really with the idea of down the road becoming a fighter pilot and eventually an astronaut.
Yeah, so can you tell us like what year you actually joined the Air Force and some of the aircraft you started training on?
Yeah, of course. So I eventually did get to the Air Force Academy. And after I graduated from the Air Force Academy, went off to pilot training, and that was in 1999. I started in the T-37, the mighty Tweet,
Yes.
Which the Tweet is not my favorite aircraft. Let's just put it that
really?
way. I was so excited to get to pilot training, and I really struggled with air sickness all through my first part of pilot training.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, and I blame it on the Tweet. I blame it on the Tweet in the summer, doing spins and maneuvers in the summer. But the good news is that I got over that. I think it was just, took some time to get used to it. And it did well enough that I was able to choose the fighter track, which was the T-38 for us, and loved flying the T-38. Absolutely loved it. What I really loved the most was flying low-level missions. And so I realized pretty quickly that I needed to find a follow-on aircraft that would also be good for that. And so I started looking at airplanes, really looking at the missions of different aircraft. And after talking to a lot of different pilots, now keep in mind, this is 1999, now 2000, and, trying to find out what I wanted to do, asking about missions, the A-10 appealed to me. The idea of doing close air support and supporting our troops on the ground was something that I thought was really important, and was kind of going back to that first discussion of where I got started. I felt like that mission of close air support was something bigger and more important than myself. But the A-10 in 1999, 2000 was not the Air Force's primary aircraft. In fact, it was just, it was even hard to find a picture of the A-10, posters back in the day to put on my wall, because it just wasn't that sleek, shiny, sexy airplane. But it was what I wanted. And I selected the A-10 and was lucky enough to be able to fly the A-10 as my first assignment. Really, for 20 years, I ended up flying the A-10. So I think I chose well.
Yeah, I think so as well. But obviously, like a lot of pilots, like going through the course, like they want the fast jets. Like, did you not want like that afterburner, like takeoff kind of thing? Like when you were going through, like, oh, that's cool, the F-16, F-15.
It was interesting and exciting. I mean, obviously, I got to fly the T-38.
Yeah.
But we got this one opportunity to go supersonic, and it was like you just saw like the airspeed indicator
Yeah.
change, and you're like, that's it? Like, there's nothing more than this? And so I say speed is relative, right? Like when you're at 100 feet off the ground, and even if you're going 300 knots, which is about as fast as we get, unless we're diving at the ground, it's still fast. And so speed wasn't everything. It was more for me the mission of close air support. And I love the low level flying to this day. It is one of my favorite things to do in the airplane.
Absolutely. So can you tell us like what initially the A-10 was designed for?
So the A-10 was designed for close air support, so to support our troops on the ground, which meant they built the airplane around a 19-foot long 30 millimeter gatling gun, which is the reason that you see the airplane. If you look straight down the nose of the airplane of the A-10, it's slightly offset,
Yes.
so that the gun can be just centered up. And so the airplane was built to take hits. I mean, it was designed for really those tanks coming across the border to take out the tanks, and which meant that it was built to take hits while performing its mission, solely designed for the close air support mission, and really good at doing that. The airplane itself, in addition to being built around the 30 millimeter Gatling gun, it's built so that there's protective foam lining around the fuel tanks to prevent fire after battle damage.
Wow. Didn't know that. Wow.
Yep. There are two very reliable engines. There is redundant systems in terms of hydraulics and flight controls. And then the pilot, we actually sit in what we call a titanium bathtub, which is literally a titanium bathtub. The pilot is enclosed with titanium surrounding the cockpit to help to make sure that we're safe after getting hit with battle damage.
So essentially the mission hasn't changed like when it was first designed to where it is now.
No, the mission hasn't changed. How we execute the mission has changed. The A-10 itself has gone through significant upgrades over the years. One of my jobs in the Air Force was at the 42 Test and Evaluation Squadron, and my job was to help upgrade the A-10 from the A-10A model to the A-10C model. And so now, we have the capability to do precision engagement weapons, whereas, in the early days of flying, it was all really dumb bombs, and we say smart pilots. But now we have this capability with precision engagement weapons, with data link, with helmet-mounted cueing system, hands-on throttle and stick. All of these things that our sister airframes have had for a long time. The A-10 finally by about 2008 started having those items on the aircraft, and then we've continued to develop since then.
Yeah, I'm sure our viewers would love to know this. Like, can you talk us through some of your flying training and what was like coming from the T-38 onto the A-10?
So the best thing about the A-10, well, there's many good things about the A-10. I guess I can't say that.
Yeah.
One of the great things about the A-10 is that when you fly it for the first time, you're solo. And so that was a pretty cool experience. We do a lot of training leading up to that. We do a lot of training in the simulators. But the very first time you get in that airplane, you're solo. And you'll have an IP, an instructor, pilot, tucked in right behind you. But still, the first time you take off, you're solo. And so that was a really neat experience to take off for the first time. And it was all me. I will tell you that flying the airplane, the A-10 is not a difficult airplane to fly. Really, when it comes down to it, it's a fairly forgiving airplane. It was designed that way. It is all the tactics, techniques, and procedures that we do when we support troops on the ground that make it hard to fly. And so the first couple rides are fairly straightforward. You get to do instruments and, learn a little about how the aircraft maneuvers. And then finally, you get to go to the range, which is really what every pilot desires. If you're an A-10 pilot, that's really what you're looking for, is your first chance to go to the range to shoot the gun for the first time, which in truth, you're not actually an A-10 pilot until you shoot the gun. That's when we give out the patches for the pilots to wear. But it's really getting to the range for the first time to be able to shoot the gun and feel that. And I mean, when you shoot the gun for the first time in the airplane, like it's slightly overwhelming because the gun, like when you pull the trigger on the gun, the whole jet shakes. You can smell the gun gases. You can see it out in front of you. It's just a total experience.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And so it's exciting to see it. And then we're only aiming at these targets that they're not filled with fuel or anything. They're just metal hulks. So the only feedback that we get is these little sparkles that show up on the tank when the metal of our target practice rounds hit the tank. But those sparkles are what you see to know that you actually hit the target, which is obviously something that we want to be able to do. So we definitely had a simulator before our first flight because we spent a lot of time in the simulator. So we would start just simple things like learning how to do our ground ops, trying to make sure that we could move all the switches and get everything started. And then you kind of progress from there. But a lot of what we do in the simulator is to prepare for emergencies. And so even on our first flight, if we lose an engine or something like that happens, they want us to be prepared for that scenario. And so we've spent a lot of time in the simulator. And so by the time I got to my first flight, I felt very ready. I felt like I was ready for it. It was still, though,
confident.
I felt confident, but it's still nerve wracking, right? Like you want to be good at it. You don't want to screw up. I mean, the last thing you want to do is do something stupid in the airplane. And so you're still nervous, but super excited. I mean, I remember walking out on the flight line at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. It was hot. It was summer, out on the tarmac. But to walk up for the first time and like see your crew chief there waiting for you, and they give you a salute, you salute back, and then you do your walk around of the airplane. And the whole time you have an instructor watching you. I mean, they're going to make sure you don't miss anything. Oh yeah, they'll watch you for a bit, and then they'll kind of get you settled in the airplane. And then they go get their airplane started, which they do 10 times faster. And I'm still trying to catch up, get my own airplane started at this point. But then it's, time to go and taxiing out and getting down to the end of the runway. They do all the checks. They check everything over. And then your instructor essentially says, all right, you got the lead. And we taxi out on the runway. And the instructor, again, is just tucked in right behind us. And I remember getting cleared for takeoff, and it's kind of like that deep breath of like, all right, I can do this. And then just rolling down the runway. I mean, it's not like the A-10 slams you in the back of the seat. It's a pretty gradual roll down the runway.
Yeah.
And then, taking off is still, I mean, it's still pretty cool. Like I worked really hard to get there. And so it was really cool to take off for the first time and get the mission done and then kind of land for the first time, knowing like, all right, like I got here, I got started. It was still a really cool experience.
So how, coming from the T-38 to your A-10 training, how long does that take before you get to frontline squadron?
So it's about a year at pilot training with T-37s and then T-38s. And then we'll spend another 3 months or so at Introduction to Fighter Fundamentals, which is where we learn how we're still flying the T-38, but now we're learning a little bit about air-to-air maneuvering, air-to-ground maneuvering, learning what it takes to be a fighter pilot, learning about the culture and the mindset, briefs and debriefs, all of those things. And then finally, we go on to A-10 training, which is about 6 months of training out at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. We spend 6 months, and it starts with just the basics in terms of like instrument flying. Then we go to air maneuvers, and then we go to the range. We start doing just kind of basic surface attack where there's nothing other than us trying to hit the target. And then we take it to the tactical range. And now that's where we really start to get into our bread and butter and what we're good at, and where we bring in ground troops to help talk us onto different targets. That's where we really start learning the tactics, techniques, and procedures as a wingman. Just hanging on the wing, being a good number two, being in position, being on the radios, following the procedures. And then from there, once we finish that, we are officially A-10 qualified pilot. And then we show up at our operational unit, and then we would get a combat mission ready checkout, meaning that the squadron that you go to, your operational squadron, still wants to check you out and make sure that you're good to go and ready to deploy for combat. So it's changed over the years. We've tried to shorten the training a bit here and there, but that's the training that I went through.
Yeah, and what surprised me with the A-10, I've seen it up close a couple of times, what a big jet actually is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's surprisingly big. I mean, when we go to Red Flag, and I was stationed at Nellis for 3 years, we're always in the end of runway getting ready to get armed up where they check all of our weapons. And, sitting next to an F-16, I mean, you're looking down into their cockpit. I mean, we're higher, we're
Yeah.
bigger. And you don't really realize that until you pull in and you pull up next to one of the other airplanes and you realize how big the A-10 is. Yeah, I mean, the cockpit of the A-10, I would say, is for most pilots roomy. I mean, we've got
Yes.
plenty of space for a single seat fighter, all considered. But the cockpit itself and it has changed over the years because we've upgraded our systems as well. But now we have the standard hands-on throttle and stick. So a lot of switches just on the stick, and then on the throttle. For us, the stick sits in the center of the airplane, and then the throttle's over on the left side. Probably the biggest thing and one of the best upgrades we've had is we have these multifunction color displays.
Yes.
That have moving maps. It's where all our weapons is. It's where our data link is. It's really helped us in terms of our situational awareness of having awareness of what's going on outside of the cockpit. I mean, in 2003 and 2002, when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, I mean, we carried binoculars with us. I mean, that's what we used.
Wow.
They're space stabilized, but binoculars aren't, it's not
Very old
really the
school.
best technology
Yeah.
for an airplane. But now we have targeting pods. And so we have that image displayed on our multifunction color displays. We have a helmet mounted cueing system. And so now I can look outside. I can get symbology where my target is, where the friendlies are. But we still have a lot of the old gauges in the A-10. And so I've just gotten used to them. To me, they're normal. I have had the opportunity later in my career. In fact, I just finished up flying at the Air Force Academy in a Cirrus, and everything there
Nice.
is, it's very high tech compared to the A-10 in terms of our instrument displays. And so I still love kind of the old school displays, which we had plenty of in the A-10, but it was kind of intermixed with this high tech upgrades as well.
Tell us how it went from the A to the C. How did that transition work?
So we started testing the A-10C. Let's see, this is about the 2006, 7, 8 timeframe when
Right.
I was at Nellis Air Force Base. And part of it was we had asked for upgrades in the A-10 for a long time. And it was really until they put us at the top of the priority list, which, after 9/11, the role of the A-10 and the mission of the A-10 changed dramatically, just in terms of how much we were used and how busy we were. And so getting these upgrades were significant in terms of the capability that we could bring to the fight.
Yeah.
So we finally got bumped up to really the top of the list, if you will, in terms of funding
Wow.
and testing capability. And so we had developmental testing, which our squadron at Eglin Air Force Base did. And then we were the operational test. And so we were really looking at not so much does it work, but how do we employ it? And we tested every bit of weaponry that we could drop and shoot on the A-10 to make sure it would work. We worked very closely with the software, all the designers, and all the software engineers and designers. Little things like colors on displays, switch locations, all of those things had to be tested to make sure that they were done in the correct way. We we didn't always get it right. I mean, to be honest, I mean, we did the best that we could. Sometimes we would go out, we think something was good, we'd go out and fly it, and it didn't really work the way we wanted to. In fact, the first time we went to go shoot live AIM-9 missiles over the water test ranges, I went out to shoot the AIM-9, and I remember just being like locked up on the drone right in front of me, hit the weapons release button or pickle button, and nothing happened. I mean, the missiles did not come off the rail.
Oh, no.
And it was like, of course, I'm like, well, shit, did I do something wrong? Like, is this, that's the first thing
My
you
fault,
go
yeah.
to, right? Is
Yeah,
what
cool.
mistake did I make? And so we cycled everything, went through everything, and the same thing with the other aircraft. And so, there were things like that happened. There were mistakes along the way, and that's why we test. There were certainly things that we missed. And so all of that came out during the test. And it was everything. There were so many upgrades and so many changes that it took us, years to kind of progress. And then it all came out in different sequences. So aircraft would get upgrades. We would train those pilots in the upgrades.
Yeah.
It would get more upgrades. We'd have to continue to train. So for the pilots in the 422, the test squadron, we would go out to other units and teach them and train them about how to fly the new A-10C. We would train up their instructors, and so then they would be able to train their own pilots. But it was a significant transition for our community. I mean, if you can imagine, here are pilots that have been really doing an excellent job at performing the mission with paper maps, with binoculars, with grease pencils, right? We would fly with red and black grease pencils to mark things on maps.
Yeah.
We did that well. And now we had all this new technology, and it was hard for some of the pilots to transition.
Oh, really?
I will tell you that the younger pilots, like the ones that grew up playing video games, like for them, it was like, this is not a big deal. Yeah. For the older pilots, right? For some of us, it was like, ooh, I don't know. I kind of like the old way of doing business.
Right.
And so it was just a mind shift change. Once we realized that we could be more effective, more efficient, we were faster in terms of getting bombs on target and supporting the ground troops. It took time for the community to transition, but we have a much better product now. And like I said, we're more efficient and we are more effective.
So what kind of weapons in your time could the A-10 carry?
In my time, we could carry just about, over the course of my 20 years of flying, we went from, dumb bombs to smart bombs with GPS guided, laser guided. Those were significant changes for us. And now I've just seen some new pictures out there of from the test squadron again of the A-10 carrying the SDBs, the small diameter bombs. So, yeah, so it's pretty impressive to see all the changes. When it comes down to it, though, that 30 millimeter Gatling gun is still our most, precise, accurate go-to weapon for a troops in contact scenario.
Absolutely. I want to talk about the gun. That was obviously the A-10 is famous for this. So yeah. Can you tell us what it's like to fire, and can you tell us maybe your first time firing it? What was it like?
Yeah. So we go out to the range the first time. And again, just like normal flying for the first time, there is an instructor tucked in right behind you. And so we roll in, and the first time is actually dry. So we have the capability to kind of pull the trigger, everything, nothing happens, nothing comes out of the gun. So it's a dry pass just to make sure we're on parameters, because we're really trying to nail, as we turn into the target, we're trying to nail an altitude, an airspeed, and a dive angle.
Nice.
So that when we aim right at the target, we're exactly where we want to be. And then ideally your pipper, where the gun is aiming, is right on the target as well. And so the first time you do it, you'll have an instructor tucked in right behind you. They'll let you do a couple dry passes to make sure you're safe. And then they tell the ranger that the next pass will be a hot pass. And then you'll go around. It's essentially like a rectangle pattern, and get yourself set up, and then roll in and get your nose pointed right at the target and call in. And the ranger says cleared hot, and then pull the trigger. And that is kind of when you get the full feedback, because you pull the trigger and you're hoping for about, at least a second on the trigger. And the jet just shakes. You can smell that gun gas, and then,
Wow.
You can see the smoke out in front of you. And then ideally the bullets are hitting the target. So it's a total experience to shoot the gun for the first time. It's pretty cool. And as I went back as an instructor in the A-10 to teach at our training unit, And it was always really fun to be on the other side too, to be the instructor,
Yes.
to watch the student do that for the first time, because they're always so excited.
I grin up to here,
Most of the
probably.
time. Oh yeah, exactly. And then when they come back in from the sortie from the mission, they're just smiling ear to ear, like, okay, now we know what this A-10 flying is all about.
If you can tell us like some of the strengths and weaknesses of the A-10, obviously the strengths you kind of mentioned, but maybe some of the weaknesses as well of the A-10.
I think the one thing that most pilots will tell you is a weakness of the A-10 is our engines. They're reliable, they are durable, but we really saw the impact in Afghanistan when the temperatures were high.
Yeah.
And we were at higher elevations at Bagram Air Base. We could not take off with either the amount of weapons that we wanted or the amount of fuel that we wanted because of the limitations. And so that is one thing I think if you were to ask most A-10 pilots what they would like new on the airplane, it would be new engines. They've served us well, they've done good, but we are also operating in a different environment that we have in the past. And so you'll see it even at Nellis Air Force Base, hot summer months, fully loaded with weapons. Yeah. They just don't give us the thrust that we need.
And do you think the Air Force will actually upgrade their engines for the A-10?
That's a big bill. I don't know. I'd like to say I think so, but I think it's more likely I doubt it. It's just, again, the A-10 is under threat for sticking around, and there are things that they are upgrading on it that are much needed, like our wings. They've taken some damage over the years and have, those are probably more important at this point. It's hard to know. I mean, I'm out of the Air Force now, and so hard to know the ins on that. But my guess is that that's not something that's going to happen.
I guess watch this space, I guess.
I would be pleasantly surprised. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So, Kim, did you ever fly at Red Flag?
Yes.
And can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I actually thinking about Red Flag was one of my first exercises, and I think I was trying to. Sorry, it's been a long time, but I remember I'll tell you the Red Flag experience that I remember was I got my mission commander upgrade at Red Flag.
Oh wow!
And yeah, well, that's like if you're going to get a mission commander upgrade and you want a place to be like out there in front of everybody, again, hoping you don't screw it up, it's Red Flag. And I had an instructor with me, but Red Flag it's a huge exercise, and there are sometimes all the services, sometimes foreign aircraft are there as well. But it is a huge exercise with a lot of airplanes and a lot of people. And I got my mission commander upgrade there, which meant that I was responsible for leading a mission out on the Red Flag ranges. And this was an air interdiction mission where we were going in to hit targets. But then we also knew that we were supposed to plan for a combat search and rescue mission. So we knew that somebody would be simulated, shot down. And that was my responsibility to lead all the planning, all the preparation. So we get all the information the day before, a couple days before, and we're just planning with all the other leads for the different aircraft, different mission sets. And then we put the mission plan together, we brief it, we get critiqued on it, we get questions, and then we go fly it. And there is, I would say, in terms of the pressure I've faced, other than really in combat, like this was the highest pressure scenario of being on the spot, being in the lead, in charge of the entire Red Flag mission, knowing that everybody is watching. And everybody's counting on you to make the right decisions, whether it's a Rolex, like people are late, you're trying to decide when to push across into enemy territory, if you will, out on the ranges. You're making just decisions for the entire mission package. And then you're also trying to fly your own mission. So while I'm doing this, I'm also leading a 4-ship of A-10s. We're down low. We're trying to avoid, I think it was Raptors at the time, that are out, looking for us, because there's red air out there that they're simulated enemy threats. And we're just, trying to fly down at 100 feet in the weeds, trying to avoid them to get to our target, not get shot at by the enemy surface to air threats, and all while kind of listening what's going on with everybody else.
Yeah.
And then there's a simulated shoot down and trying to coordinate the combat search and rescue. I mean, it's massive. It was a lot of pressure.
It's giving me a headache just thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it gives me a headache even looking back, and also wondering how the hell did I do that? But that was not my first red flag experience, but I think my most memorable one was that mission. And I think probably even more pressure is the debrief at the end. I mean, the debrief at red flag is probably the biggest learning point, because everybody comes together and you stop the tapes, you review the film, you look at people's shots, you look at where people made mistakes. It's a full experience. And getting my mission commander upgrade there was a lot of pressure. But, to have that done and be like, all right, if I can do that, I can lead a mission package into combat as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And I actually haven't asked our guests on this, but the red flag debriefs, if it says oh, you made a mistake, is there any embarrassment there, or like, oh god, oh, I've made a mistake, or do you own it?
Well, I mean, coming from somebody that's made plenty of mistakes in my life, right? Like you're always a little bit embarrassed, right? You're like, well, you kind of get called out in front of everybody, but I think the focus and the mindset at that point is, all right, we made a mistake. Let's go back and look at why, right? We own the mistake. We go, okay, what was the root cause? What if I did something wrong on that mission? If I made a mistake, let's say I missed the target. Well, let's go back and look at why. Was it something in the brief? Was it something that happened on the range? Was it intelligence that we just didn't have the right information? There's so many things that can contribute. So we really drilled down to what was the root cause, and then what lessons can we learn, right? What are we going to do differently the next time? Because we can learn as many lessons as we want, but unless we do it differently the next time, it doesn't really matter. So I think, the mindset going into that is you own the mistake, you figure out the root cause, you define the lessons learned, and then you decide what you're going to do differently on the next mission set. But yeah, I mean, I think for anybody, I don't know, maybe I think, there's always a little bit of ego involved, right? The ego gets a little bruised when you make a mistake, especially in a crowd like that with a bunch of fighter pilots. So
how did you integrate with other nations? Did you find it easy, even with the Brits or, the Australians, whatever, who were there? How did you find that?
I think, I've worked with so many different other nations throughout my time in the Air Force. It's just been, it's seamless a lot of the times, just because we have the same mindset in terms of what we're trying to do, trying to be better. There's certainly technology things that cause problems. Sometimes our systems and communications don't always talk, and that's why we work together at Red Flag. So we figure that out before we go to combat. But I think about my time just either, at Red Flag, in Iraq and Afghanistan, and just, we've done this for a while. And so I think we're all really good at it. And the more we work together, the better we are. But yeah, it's always been such a great experience and a fun experience. And I think one of the things that was unique for me was being at Bagram Air Base, and you had other countries living there with you. And so it was really an opportunity to get to know people and on a more personal level, which I think anytime you can do that and get to know people on a personal level, then it means that when you work together professionally, it turns out you're better at that too.
And I can imagine there was some great parties at Red Flag as well.
Yes, Red Flag, yes. Afghanistan, no. Although the Brits always seem to have better parties than us in Afghanistan. We had these rules. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But Red Flag, yeah, of course. You work so hard, you push so hard, you're under a lot of stress, and we're pretty good at relieving stress too. We're pretty good at the Red Flag bar on a Friday night at Nellis. The club is a fun place. I mean, there's a lot of stories and lessons going on around the bar too.
I'm sure we can't share many of them, but
no.
Exactly.